contracts.
Right.
All right, so we are live.
Good.
Your most money does not come from our television contract, I promise you. But we will be learning the teachings of the Shlah HaKadosh, Rabbi Yishai Levi Horowitz, on Shavuot, and then counting the Omer.
When did the Shlah live?
1850. 1850, so?
Let's get the precise years. Do you see what I'm typing in, or just the thing that was shared?
No.
We see it.
Yeah.
We
We did.
So 1555 to 1630.
So Eliza's Binyamin said they figured out he's related to the Shlah also like 13 generations ago. That's why I asked when he lived.
Yeah, 1550.
So
1550.
that's possible.
So he's right after the Ramah.
So
That's right.
that's possible.
So tonight I thought we'd talk about the Tikkun Leil Shavuot in the Shlah, also because it becomes an important source for it. So it begins with a passage I'm not going to go through here in the Zohar about how the Zohar has several passages that talk about adorning the Shekhinah on that night. The Shekhinah is the divine presence. What does it mean to adorn the Shekhinah? To dress the divine presence up like it's a wedding. The idea of Shavuot is a wedding between Israel and the Torah, as it were. But the Shekhinah, the divine presence, becomes a party to this with a feminine aspect. And so the Shlah is a mix of both the mystical aspects of it, but also practically. Now, I think we'll discuss this for much of the rest of our time tonight and in subsequent weeks. Has anyone ever been to a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, a Shavuot night learning, where the learning isn't thematic lectures, but it's a fixed set of things you chant?
No.
Nope.
So originally the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, you might be wondering, or now you'll wonder, why is it they call it Tikkun Leil Shavuot? Like Tikkun means a Kabbalistic fix for some kind of thing that's gone wrong in the world. Usually the Tikkunim, things that are a Tikkun in mystical literature, are a fixed thing you recite. Like Rabbi Nachman has the Tikkun Klali, the general fix, of reciting certain psalms and confessions. So what's the Tikkun when you go and you eat cheesecake and listen to lectures? So the answer is there really isn't. The Tikkun was a set thing that you said. So I'll read from it here. Seder halimud shel Zohar Leila kvar nitparsem v'nodal l'rabim adei hakuntrasin shenitpashtu. There were these pamphlets that spread around about what you should learn on this night, a custom. V'minag azeh nitpashet b'chol Eretz Yisrael b'chol ha'malchut inaki kulam ke'achad migedolim v'ad ketanim v'chein kimu v'kiblu aleim v'al zarehem, the language of Purim. People, what's the authority of this tikkun? The authority of it is that people accepted it. Using the same language, kimu v'kiblu, the people accepted and established, that the Gemara uses to say that Bnei Israel accepted the covenant, right? So the Talmud asks a famous question: how could it be that we are bound by the Torah? After all, wasn't it kind of forced on us? Like you leave Egypt, you go to Mount Sinai, what choice do you have? And then to exacerbate the problem, they quote the Midrash that God held the mountain over us, right, and was going to crush us with Mount Sinai if we didn't accept. And he said, if you accept, it'll be fine for you, but if not, you're going to die here. So the Talmud answers, no, that might be true and that Midrash is a way of emphasizing that when you're a slave and you're brought out, you have and with the miracles, there's no volition in accepting that. It's like, we either had no choice, or another version of it is we're so in love with God at that time because of the miracles that we didn't have a fair choice. It's not an objective time to make this kind of decision. That's what the Midrash is probably emphasizing. So So kimu v'kiblu, they accepted it at Purim, when it certainly would have been easier to assimilate. Okay. So I'll write it all. So those who are, and this is a phrase that later became used for a set of Jews, right? But at the time just meant the pious. Charidim lidvar Hashem, that those who quake in fear for the word of God should try to have a minyan. Now, a word about this, and I've heard this from many different people, from Rav Lichtenstein also, that when it talks about a Baal Nefesh in the Mishnah Berurah, someone who's extra stringent, or Charedim L'Dvar Hashem, those that quake at the word of God, people now read it and assume, I've heard this also from Rav Hershel Schachter, that it's talking about them. But when it was written, this wasn't implied to mean everyone. It was implied to mean those people that want to be extra pious. But it wasn't like, if you're not extra pious, then you're horrible. That wasn't the meaning. The meaning was, for people that want to be extra pious, this is what you should do. So for people that want to be extra pious, you should have a minyan. Note, this issue of minyan will become really important in the encounter of Shlomo Levi Alkabetz and Yosef Karo with an angel on Shavuot night, the minyan. Right, that if 10 people eat together, even in Sanhedrin, it says, then the Shekhinah is there. So you should learn on Shavuot night part of the entire Tanakh, so part of the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. Shisha Starim, the Mishnah. Sefer Yetzirah, the Kabbalistic book that talks about the mystical power of the letters. Zohar, some of the Zohar. The Taryag Mitzvot. You should learn all 613 mitzvot, like the list of the commandments, as counted by many of the people that enumerated the list. So the Rambam or the Sefer HaChinuch. So how do you do this? You're going to learn the whole Torah, the whole Bible, and the whole Mishnah, and all of the Kabbalah on Shavuot night? I mean, I don't know about you, like, we spend our lifetimes trying to learn even small subsections of these things. How are you going to learn it all on one night? And the idea is what? That the Tikkun is like the whole Torah. You want to get the whole Torah into Shavuot, not like a particular piece, but all of it. So obviously you can't do that. So you have to take highlights, like greatest hits from the different parts.
Also, it's likrot, right, which means to read.
Right. So likrot means to recite. So this is important. I do think that now we assume it's a cognitive sort of learning. Like, I'm going to listen to, and people ask, well, how am I supposed to learn at 3 a.m? You're not. The point was never to like, this is the time that you're going to really understand it by thinking about it deeply, because that's not something that makes sense at night. Rather, the idea that was by chanting large sections of the scripture and of the tradition, which hopefully you're already familiar with, it's a way of jogging your memory, but also entering into almost a trance-like state of just like reviewing the whole thing, which is a different activity.
Right.
It's more of a spiritual practice than a
Really
we took it, I think, to become more like an evening of learning as opposed to that. So so you have to read 6 psukim from every parsha. And so from all of the books of the Bible, you should read a little bit from every book. So for every parsha, you read the first 3 psukim and the last 3 psukim. For every book of Tanakh, the Bible, you read the first 3 verses and the last 3 verses. So now he mixes in Kabbalah here. So maybe you know, that the God's name has different letters, and in the Kabbalistic system, the 4 letters of God's name represent different sefirot. Let me pull it up here to make it a little. A different screen share. Are you seeing the chart of Sefirot?
No.
Not yet.
No, I'll do a new share. Have we left the Shalom?
Not yet. Not
Yeah.
yet.
Good. Okay, great. So
Yep.
God's name has 4 letters, at least the Tetragrammaton, Yud, He, Vav, He. And they, in the Kabbalistic system, those letters are associated in different ways with different Sefirot. So Chokhmah, here, wisdom, is associated with the first letter of God's name, Yud, representing the very first sort of thing there is to say, a primordial point here in the translation. The first He of God's name, so Yud, He of God's name is represented by Binah, which is a womb. Note the letter He has like an entry into it, and it's spacious, so it's a place of incubation. It is feminine. That's He. Vav, so how are you going to do this? The way they understand it, Vav is a line, but also Vav is the numerology of 6, representing the 6 Sefirot of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, 6. So that becomes Vav in this system. And then Malchut, Shekhinah is the final He, also feminine, similar to, or often considered the daughter of Binah. Okay, this is the inner life of God in the Kabbalah. So he's just telling us now that Vav, or Tiferet, or all of this, is associated with Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah. This is the written Torah in God's name. God, these aspects of God, of kindness and strength and balance and eternity and grandeur and collecting it all, foundation, though covenant, whatever. We have a long lecture to speak about the Sefirot, but the point is they're represented by the Vav. Okay, back. So what he's saying is that the first 3 psukim represent Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, and the last 3 psukim represent Netzach, Hod, Yesod. So you see how this becomes a Kabbalistic way. Each pasuk, there's a kavanah, or an intention, that you're not just reciting the pasuk, but the pasuk is an expression of aspects of God's emanation. After all, what is emanation? Fundamentally, it's God coming into our world. And how does God come into our world as Jews? In the Torah. That's like what we know of God is manifest in the Torah. And so it's not just reading these things to like know them or review them. It's reading these things as a symbol, but not like an actual symbol. Like I hate to use the analogy of transubstantiation and like the Eucharist in a Catholic church, but the sense that the Torah is becoming embodied, God is becoming embodied fully in these verses of the Torah. Okay. So then he goes through every parsha and he tells you exactly which psukim you're going to read. You see that there, like in Bereshis, you'll read these 3 and those 3, etc., through the end of the Torah. And by the way, often this would be by rolling out a Torah. So I don't know if they do this anywhere where you open the Torah and like lane them as part of the Tikkun. So in the prophets, you don't do from every parsha, you do from every prophet. But when you get to the Ma'aseh Merkava, Ezekiel has a vision of the divine chariot leaving Israel and going into exile, which is the Haftarah for Shavuot morning, that you read all of it. The Chabakuk, Tefillah leChabakuk ad Gmira. And when you get to the prophet Chabakuk, there's a Tefillah of Chabakuk that's very beautiful, that you're supposed to read all of it. Achar kach kesidra zeh b'ktuvim, and then you do the writings. He notes, Upsuke echa yomar benachat. So you might ask the question, when I read Lamentations, which is a lament, and on Shavuot, we read it as a lament with the tune that is mournful. So am I supposed to like mourn or I'm just reading it? The answer is no. You just read it the right way. Okay, then he notes, Rak b'sefer Tehillim. I'm going through this all because I think it's interesting. This was the custom for many, many years about what the Tikkun was and how even people that are opposed to changing the Tikkun Leil Shavuot, like we wanted to do something in the morning at our shul, and there was surprising resistance to this innovation. Like the morning, it's the night. But we weren't doing the thing in the night that they did. It was already a very different thing. So I think it's interesting to know what they did. Rak b'sefer Tehillim and Psalms, Yomer Gamkin HaMizmor HaShamayim Misaprim Kavod El. That psalm that God tells of the heavens tell of the glory of God, which is also in Shabbat morning Psukei Zimra. And also Samach Ches, Hakum Elokim V'chol HaMizmor, the Timna Pei, Kuf Yud Tes. So people know Kuf Yud Tes has an acrostic with all of the different letters, however many times. And people say people's like names on yard sites that way and different, and use that psalm in that way. Uvisov Mishle min Eshet Chayil. So at the end of Proverbs, people read all of Eshet Chayil ad sof until the end. That's the 31st chapter there. And why? Because it's the Shekhinah, the divine presence. The whole night is about the divine presence. So once you finish the Bible, you've done the Bible, then you read the Mishnah. When we come Masach, you do Mishnah Rishona, Mishnah Achrona, the first and last Mishnah of everything, the first Mishnah of Brachot, the last Mishnah of Brachot. V'yomad Kaseder, in order. Achar Kain Sefer Yetzirah, Mishnah Rishona Ba'achrona. The Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, I don't know if people have ever learned that. It's a Kabbalistic book. It's not long. It's very short. You learn the first teaching and the last teaching. Achar Kach B'Zohar, Parsha Emor. Achar Kach, so then you learn the Zohar. And note, there are a bunch of Kaddishes in here, which I've skipped. Like after you finish a lot of things, you say a Kaddish. So it has like a feel of a service. There are Kaddishes throughout. So here, for example, V'yomru Kaddish Derabanan. Then you should read the 613 commandments in the Rambam, or Bismag, Sefer Mitzvos Gedolos, another statement of it, or Seder HaMufchar, whatever medieval codification you prefer. We're not going to get into the details. This teaching we always say to say a Kaddish. It's quoted in Makos that Rabbi Hanania Ben Akasha, Omer Ratzakadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Israel, that God wanted to merit Israel. Therefore, he gave a lot of Torah. Hirbalam Torah mitzvahs. God gave so many different kinds of Torah and mitzvahs. Different understandings of that, different things speak to different people, or the more there is to learn, if it feels like so much it's infinite, that is more chance for enjoyment or reward in more simplistic versions of it. V'imru Kaddish Darabanan, and again, the Kaddish Darabanan. Uva Achrona, Karov l'shiyeh or hayom, close to when it's day rise. Now, ikru kol shir hashirim, you read all of Song of Songs, ve'yomru Kaddish, and you say Kaddish, v'herayom yelchu l'tfilah, and when the sun rises after this tikkun, you should go to the mikveh. All right, Yud Gimel Kaddishim Mispar Echad, v'chol ma shekorim b'torah shebachtav yakru hakol b'nigun hata'amim zeh mala gedola. So there are 13 Kaddishes throughout the night. And why 13 Kaddishes? Because the gematria of Echad, if you do that, of one. And who is one, of course?
God.
God is one. Everyone, Uncle Moshe, someone. Yes. So Echad, one, is Aleph is the first letter in Echad. And then Chet is 8. 1 and 8 is 9. And Daled, the last letter of Echad, is 4. 1, 8, and 4. What does it spell? 13. So there are 13 Kaddishes. So this, which is really interesting, is a theatrical enactment of the notion of God's oneness and the internal workings of that oneness according to the Kabbalistic system. And you should, of course, when you read the Torah, you should learn it in the beautiful trop, and that is important. So that's what we have tonight from the Shla. That's the Tikkun of the Shla. There are slightly different versions of it. I always thought it would be interesting to do the Tikkun one time, like not to have thematic lectures on this or that subject of interest, but to do the Tikkun. Next time, we're going to learn about what happened, which we studied twice before, but it's always worth doing again. When Rav Yosef Karo and Shlomo Levi Alkabetz went to do the Tikkun, and an angel visited them, or a Magid, a divine angel. That will be, I think, this was kind of background information, which I think is useful. Maybe a little boring to hear and digest, but I think hopefully you've learned something. I'll pause now to ask before we count the Omer. Does anyone have a reflection on hearing about what the Tikkun Leil Shavuot is like? It's funny, it's a thing you maybe have doing all your life, but do you ever, like, what's the Tikkun Leil Shavuot? Anyone?
When did this cease?
Leil Shavuot.
When did this cease?
When did this cease? So my sense is that in Haredi communities, like Hasidic communities, they probably still do the Tikkun. I mean, I was once in a Hasidic community that still did the Tikkun. So it may not have ceased. Like, you'd go to Mea Sharim or Borough Park, they're probably doing the Tikkun. But when did it cease? That's an interesting question. Or rather, when did it become popular? In other words, was it ever that everyone was doing the Tikkun? Or were people doing the Tikkun and other people were sleeping? And when did the Tikkun become such a thing that, like, everyone in their shul was going to have a few lectures, and sometimes not even all night, but just at the beginning of the night, and some people would stay up all night and study? Because that's a different thing, really. I don't know. It's an interesting question.
Okay.
I will just note also that historians have said plenty about the revival of this around the time of the Shla and the importation of coffee from Persia for the first time. There was an article in Why Use Torah to Go about this, but it seems legitimate. There are many articles now. Like, until they had coffee, they did not do this widely. That is true. That seems to be a historical fact. So there it is. That's the Tikkun. And I guess I'm sharing it because this year on Shavuot, actually, people won't be together. So part of it is in the vein of, like, what should you do on Shavuot night if you won't be together learning? One thing you might do is the Tikkun. Like,
Okay.
you know, the first three and the last three of every parsha, of every book in the Bible, one of the first Mishnah, the last Mishnah, the first Mishnah, the last Mishnah, and a couple of things. If you are interested in doing the Tikkun and need some of the texts or something like that and don't have them, let me know. We can get you some resources. But I think it's worthwhile to consider. And I guess with that, we'll count the Omer. Any other questions or comments? Summary of tonight: the Tikkun Leil Shavuot was a Kabbalistic fix that was like a wedding ceremony of sorts with us and the divine presence, enacted by the recitation of all of Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shebechtav representing the Vav in God's name, and Torah Sheba'al Peh, which isn't stated here, representing the final Hey. And so that's what they sometimes talk about, liyachid shem yud hey b'vav hey, to unify the whole name. So this would be a way of, like, uniting different parts of God's presence through study, with 13 Kaddishes placed throughout that represented Echad.
Were we fixing something specifically?
Say again?
Was this a tikkun for something specific, or just like some particular?
Yeah, so what is the tikkun for? So that's a good question. The tikkun, the fix, was for something specific. It was for the abandonment of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence, also represented by the abandonment of Eretz Israel, of the land of Israel. So the idea was, there's God sitting in the Temple Mount, and it's abandoned. There aren't Jews in Israel. There's divine presence in the world, but people have forgotten God and don't care about God after the exile. So this is God. It's like Eicha a little bit. It's a tikkun for that. And the sense is that the Torah, why is the Torah a tikkun for that? Because the Torah is God's revelation to us. It's God making a claim to be relevant in our lives, right? Not just like through its study, but through observing it. So it's a tikkun for forgetting the importance of, like, God regularly present in our lives. Yeah, you could come up. Savta's there too. And that's why, and you'll see this next week, when the angel comes to Shlomo Alevi Alphabets, the very thing he chastises them with is that they haven't made Aliyah. And actually, it may be this episode which causes Rav Yosef Karo to make Aliyah. People have speculated about that, but he certainly made Aliyah after that. And Aliyah there is the abandonment of the land of Israel is a symbol of the Tikkun. That answers the question.
That is not for your feet, for baby. This baby is getting PJs.
Okay. With that, did that answer the question?
Yes.
So with that, we'll count tonight. It's a very special night. Last night was 32. I'll have in mind when I make my bracha, anyone over there saying amen who can't make a bracha because they may have forgotten to count tonight, but can still count. Just turning to the page here.
That's it.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al sfiras ha'omer.
Amen.
Shlosha u'shloshim yom shem arba'a shavuos v'chamisha yamim ba'omer. Today is the 33rd day, which is 4 weeks and 5 days in the Omer. Lag ba'omer.
היום 30 יום שהן 4 שבועות ו5 ימים בעומר. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I wish everyone a wonderful Lag BaOmer. One plug, tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'll be teaching with Rabbi Eliyahu Klein, mystical master, and Rabbanit Avital Engelberg from the land of Israel, 10 a.m. We'll be teaching 3 different takes on the spiritual relevance of Lag BaOmer to the coronavirus, right here on the same Zoom channel. So feel free to come on in. We won't have a bonfire going, but we will have some lively discussions. So we hope to see you there.
Fire of Torah.
Yeah, the fire, right. Koduvari ke'esh nehum Hashem, God says, the prophet Jeremiah says, the word is like fire. With that, good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night,